So as means of generating or setting an atmosphere, I'd like to share a list of words that feel important to me. Collaboration, parameters, edges, threshold, outlines, tracing, vulnerability, private, public, multiplicity, plurality, ways of looking, perspective, planes of vision, panorama, to look through and beyond, the frame, window, portal, prying, being nosy, curtain twitching, movement, dreaming, speculative, metacognition, vector, connectedness, communication, exchange, desire, longing, titillating, expectation, catalyst, surveillance, self-surveillance, watching, being watched, voyeur, layering, geological processes, history, reflecting, reframing, translating, time, belief, faith, looping, scattering, gifting, giving, reciprocation, community, obligation, control, mystery, pattern, sunsets, shadow, warm light, femininity, joy. I'm interested in the potential for our work to grow and shapeshift over time, and in the byproducts of the creative process. Where does an artwork begin and end? I'm sure many of us here will have heard the sentence, throughout your life, you only ever make one work of art. But what happens when you collaborate, teach, or your situation shifts? I'm going to share a variety of versions of my one piece with you this evening. It's density suspended. In February last year, I traced the contour of the Blorange on my bedroom window. When I first moved to Abergavenny, I was concerned I might feel claustrophobic, surrounded by mountains, my bond to the tidal estuary that shaped my upbringing calling out, despite the expansive feeling of moving from city to rural town. But actually, I found them to be comforting, with a growing bond or understanding over the last year of stillness. To see the Blorange each day is to know its heaviness. To not see it is to feel its presence. Being familiar with distance is to understand the sweat and heavy breathing of its steep incline. To pack bread and hummus, 2 bottles of water and chocolate. The line drawn, is the catalyst for the repetitious frame, where I stood at various points over the course of a year. The stability of distance layered with the closeness of seasons, weather, and the day in flux. White blossom, red rose, clothes on the line. Sometimes my looking was lazy. December has only 1 photo. But at other points, I was caught up in the ritual. 10 shots in April, 6 in August, 9 in October. This practice, a spell of bonding with place, mountain home bedroom. Printed now as 61 individual postcards, its density suspended holds this sentiment, while sending it out, scattering, sharing, letting go. To me, they are both reminder and prophetic. This year, the tree blossom came earlier. Today, I wiped away my line and I've begun to write and post the cards, which I will do in correlation to the time of year they were taken, a year layered over a year. You can request one if you like. A drawing may be described as beautifully observed. Observation and capturing a moment that contains some form of rupture, which in its framing holds energy, is how I approach making and enjoy seeing or engaging with the world. Sorry. Here are some sketchbook ideas, series of little observations that hold potential. They are responsive and unplanned, but carry ideas that could be described as monumental. Ending up in the same place each time a page is turned, the fusion of body into landscape, the power of the frame. These themes reoccur in my work. Important to my practice is the idea proposed by the artist placement group that context is half the work, meaning that a work's environment, historic, social, physical, is an important signifier within how it may be read. House-made. In 2016, I participated in House-made, organised by Made Gallery. It offered a group of artists with a performative practice to respond to a Victorian former municipal building situated on 5 Trade Street behind Cardiff Central Station, which was soon to be demolished and replaced by luxury flats. At the end of the residency period, we had an open house where I met the public at the front door as an estate agent and gave them a spiel about the history and future of the property, affirming their decision as creative investors before entering the exhibition. I fully embodied the overconfident salesperson with the wish to confuse, surprise, or amuse the exhibition visitors, whilst contextualising or recontextualising the building. In the shabby front room, I had set up a nostalgic living room scenario. 2 large comfy chairs, a box TV looped in static, a warm lamp, a side stool with snacks. I invited individuals who lived together, student housemates, a couple, my grandparents, to sit in the chairs. They were given the instruction to speak to one another, starting each sentence with either "imagine if we had" or "imagine if we could." Although set up, their stilted dialogue contained the real and echoed the building in its state of reflection, reminiscing and dreaming, both woeful and hopeful. Imagine if we had more ambition, had our own TV series, had thought about it a bit first. Imagine if we could go to Ibiza. Imagine if we could get funding. Imagine if we could show how we really feel. Jumping in. Jumping In was a 2018 Facebook Live event in which I scheduled and performed 5 minutes of landing in and jumping out of the webcam frame. I was considering the connectivity of people in their various domestic spaces mediated through social platforms. I was jumping in and out of their spaces too. Layering of the personal and public. Space and time is something we have all become exceptionally familiar with over the last year. 6 people was the height of my views during this action. I wonder how different this would have been during lockdown. Josie Sparrow in her text, Distant Voices in Fluid Communion, states, "There are so many ways to be distant. There are so many ways to be together." Communities networked through the social media has become a lifeline for me, financially and emotionally. In December 2018, Sarah Bolton and I initiated a group of artists in response to having access to a space in Melville Centre. We wanted to create a community of artists whose approach resonated and whose works pertain a poetic sensibility and an element of the live. We became SUll, named after the unit's former code SU11. We printed and displayed our definition of the word on the unit's window. SU11, in brackets, pronounced SUll, verb, 1, a refusal to play dead. 2, a space reborn. What once was Austin Reed is now SUll. A series of fantastic events occurred here, mostly led by individuals from the group rather than collectively. However, managing the space without a group focus or funding became a burden. We decided to move out and become a studio group without walls. We are now based in various locations across the UK, from Swansea to South Uist. Our email address changed from sull.cdf, Cardiff, @gmail.com to sullcollective@gmail.com. Between September 2020 and March 2021, our group re-amalgamated. We reformed, re-met, or in some cases, met for the first time. Through a syllabus of online workshops aiming to provide a positive pressure for sustaining individual and collective practice. Our workshop themes included care, confidence, language, community, labour, movement, womanhood, translation, support. We established the framework and wrote a funding application as a group, which, as we were not an organisation, I applied for under the Arts Council Wales Individual Stabilisation Fund. We did not see this as a fund that could necessarily pay rent and bills, but as a carving of time for simultaneous exploration and action. Workshops were led by internal members and externally invited practitioners. Ours was an evolving programme based on need, including childcare and other work commitments. We established a participation fee of £15 an hour, likening this to a rate paid by a workplace to undergo training. We generated a scheme of spare change, where members could donate fees or sections of a fee back to the SUll pot. We questioned the nature of the workshop and how it can be a practice in itself. Who the public is, what moments are shared externally and what remains private. What it means to be a willing or not participant, and how we can develop a supportive network that remains as such. In many ways, it felt like we were aspiring towards a utopian state, but even in our aspirations, we still met friction and burnout. It's difficult to organise a group whilst attempting to flatten hierarchy.
Ready? The SUll Collective Group WhatsApp started on the 19th of October 2019.
Would it be lazy to liken it to knitting a very long scarf?
Initially, I thought the WhatsApp chat ran alongside SUll the whole time, omnipresent.
Metaphors of weaving are always close when we think of the women working together.
But actually, we made it after we left the Melville Centre space.
And now, more than ever, the domestic has been simmering at the sidelines, humming in the background of every Zoom call.
Chat became the new space to talk and share ideas, the thread through everything we've done since.
What about WhatsApp chat bubbles as small bricks? Our chat would be very tall by now. No gravity, no risk of the messages teetering off to one side.
Lewis Hyde's The Gift links art to gift giving and gift economies, exploring ideas of reciprocity, cycles and return. Hyde brings up folktale after folktale where generosity is rewarded, by given bread multiplies, and grateful birds flock about you to keep you warm at night.
Thoughts and ideas stack upon one another and could extend up for miles. WhatsApp remembers everything.
Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens.
The fables chime with our approach as SUll and with our syllabus. Why hoard when you can give? Why compete when you could collaborate?
Look, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them.
Lauren reads God's Babel wrath as pro-nomadic. I read him as co-op god, punishing collective action. Both feel relevant.
How do you encourage a generosity of spirit in a capitalist economy? Hyde at one point describes a Native American gift economy, mutated by the arrival of settler Europeans. Thousands of factory-made blankets are amassed. Sewing machines are thrown into the ocean.
Is a chat sedimentation, accumulation, or is it wandering, a string back through the forest?
I export the SUll WhatsApp chat and put it into a word counter. Other than names, I find the most common word is thanks.
Is the WhatsApp a scroll? Is it record keeping or a more spontaneous scrawl?
Next comes meeting, then time, workshop, session, kiss, links, everyone. The words that recur are logistic, collective, or encouraging.
Kerouac claimed he wrote the On the Road scroll in 3 weeks, but it isn't true. He spent years plotting it first. Planning didn't fit with his myth of a gifted artist.
We are generous with each other. We congratulate, send links, kisses, happy returns. The chat is a bubbling mass of ideas, times, reminders. It is a potent, sometimes stressful space.
Maybe our chat is the winding of a key, the slow coiling of a spring, potential energy that can transfer into movement at any moment.
Recurring words in order of frequency. Thanks.
Meeting.
Time.
Workshop.
Zoom.
Session.
Links.
Everyone.
Email.
Week.
Tomorrow.
Group.
Today.
Way.
Bet.
Syllabus.
Anyone.
Things.
Morning.
Slack. Invoice. Tonight.
Anything. Phone. Tuesday.
Guy. Recording questions.
Cheers. Topic. Next week.
SUll syllabus. New year. Kiss.
Happy birthday. Anthologies of care. Admin fees.
Waiting room. Admin meeting. Google Drive.
Happy New Year. PM. Outstanding invoice.
Action point. Work surface. Next Tuesday.
Good ideas, lot of love.
That piece was written by Rosie Brown and performed by members of the SUll collective. Thank you, everyone. Blind spot. I attached 9 cameras to my body and walked out of the front door of SUll Space, exited Capital Shopping Centre, followed the curvature of the building, and returned back into the space through its rear fire door. I displayed the recordings on screens which were attached to my body in corresponding locations to those of that of the cameras. I stood still in the space, allowing visitors to press play on each of them in turn. Gift Disco. So Gift Disco was made for Cul-de-sac Festival, a performance event organised by Gary Martin that occurred in May last year. It was designed for Zoom and taglined as the last Zoom party you will ever need to go to. The festival lineup included musicians, poets, and visual artists. In real time, I screenshot performers and attendees and created GIFs from them, which I uploaded to a Google Doc. At the end of the festival, I shared this doc to a disco music mix that I'd made. It was fun, celebratory, surprising, and a bit sinister. I'm interested in online video call events, live and recorded, as a material. There are so many recorded talks now available online. What happens to them? Who watches them? What will happen to this one? The voyeurism of these spaces is intriguing. The squashing of personal identity within a flat space, the trust involved, the generosity. Sophie Lindsey and I have had a shared artistic practice since 2015. Together, we develop research, create artworks, deliver workshops, and produce projects that examine site-responsive practice. We both created works for this festival. It isn't often that we both participate separately in the same exhibition or event. Sophie performed Sourdough Karaoke, a reimagining of the lyrics of Daydream Believer into a sourdough anthem. We later realised that our karaoke songs are linked in title. Touch Me by The Doors and Touch Me from Rocky Horror. During an experimental studio residency at the Melville Centre of the Arts, we transformed the songs into a karaoke duet. It felt poignant to be singing about touch at a time when it wasn't really possible to touch other people. To be released later this year. last summer, we were commissioned by Rachel Disbury So last summer, we were commissioned by Rachel Disbury to create a text for Edinburgh Art College's postgraduate students surrounding the codification of space in practical, social, and ethical terms. We created Questions from the Home, exploring living together as a method for collaboration. We wrote a Q&A that blurs authorship by anonymously moving through a series of questions considering various priorities and concerns in our shared practice and domestic life. Our answers were sorted into rooms, the rooms of our home, mingling with furniture and belongings. These spaces and belongings included front door, living room, desk, sofa, under the stairs, kitchen, sliding door, garden, hall, bedroom, roof, and loft. Living room. How has our work changed since we have been living together? We moved in together when our collaborative projects were growing in scale, larger budgets, more people involved, more visibility, which was one of the reasons it made sense. So it's difficult to distinguish the exact change caused by moving in together as it occurred during a shift. However, sharing physical space has enabled an acceleration in our working practice that would have been difficult to grow and sustain had we been apart. And by apart, I mean in different countries. I think living together means that sight-sit is more constantly at the front of my mind, and I'm able to share ideas or thoughts with you as they pop into my head. Things that arise more generally within our shared living experience have also become factors that shape where we go, resulting in a more holistic but also more intense development. Our shared and delegated workload is more visible than before, along with its impact on our individual commitments and lives. The walls of this house have been chatting about us. What have they been saying? They've been experiencing a very bland sitcom and think we are in need of some more guest stars. Desk. What is the balance between professional, unprofessional, and formal, informal in our public and private relationship? This is a big, multi-layered question. The spectrum of private to public is so dense, especially within the arts, where personal interests feed public output and work. You are the brand that people buy into, an individual sensibility or way of looking. Perhaps through working collaboratively, this is sidestepped somewhat, with the weight of responsibility shifting across two persons' shoulders. As I sit here trying to write, I'm distracted by the heavy bass coming through the ceiling from your room. I'm not sure if you are working on a collaborative practice, your own artwork, exercising, or rearranging your possessions to fit the magic cottage trunk you recently purchased. Under the stairs. Who's the breadwinner in our household? This fluctuates. However, I think of you as having more formal and stable jobs. Perhaps it's become more even in the last few months, as our main source of income has been through our collaborative practice. Before this, I was still adjusting to being in a new place, finishing my MA and questioning all my life decisions. This meant I kept going into my overdraft. If money were not an issue, what would your life work situation look like? I would do less work. I would be very selective in applications. I would spend more time documenting past work. I would spend more time reading, cooking, and having baths. I would buy everyone drinks in the pub all the time. I would have a very good whiskey collection. I would probably live in a different house, maybe on my own. We could still be neighbours. Do I have any work habits that you find annoying? Not really. There are probably small things that you do that I would do another way, but there's nothing that frustrates me to the point of feeling aggravated. I enjoy working with you and your habits keep me productively motivated. Bedroom. Where does our joint practice end and our individual practice begin? I think this is different for both of us. I see your practice as being more fluid and open, where collaborations and other people's voices are present. which may make it harder to define or articulate at times. While my practice is more individual, I like to have a lot of control and can be quite rigid in my thinking, which can be positive and negative. It means that I can be confident in my ideas and commit to things quickly. My openness comes when something is in the world. Then it's less precious and fair game for people to interact, ignore, vandalise, etc. All actions should be valued as engagement. Sometimes I am more secretive about my individual practice and like to keep it deliberately separate, as our joint practice has no limits to its criticality. However, this debate and tension is what characterises our collaboration. It is a method that pushes me and our work in ways that are very different to working alone. While there is always an overlap, with ideas and resources being exchanged between joint and individual work, for me, they are stored in separate boxes. Your boundaries are less defined, sprawling across shelves and rooms with no specific home. Roof. What's the best bit about our brain? Its power. It can take on more and it is more ambitious, but it also needs to be careful so we don't become overwhelmed. In Walt Whitman's poem, There Was a Child Went Forth, a young boy walks out of doors. The early lilacs became part of the child, and grass and white and red morning glories and white and red clover, and the song of the phoebe bird, and the water plants with their graceful flat heads all became part of him. Whitman suggests that we become the things we encounter. We experience a kind of inhaling and exhaling of the world. Shell piece. I took a shell from Llansteffan beach, 3D scanned and printed it. On returning to the beach, I sanded down the original shell until it was dust. I placed the printed shell on the shoreline and watched it be taken by the tide. We Must Be Still and Still Moving. We Must Be Still and Still Moving was created as the culmination of a 3-month residency at Elysium in 2017. During my residency period, the architecture of the city was changing. And based on books I'd read and people I'd talked to, it's a city that has been in a fairly continual state of infrastructural and architectural flux, from the flattening of the city during the Swansea Blitz to the present day. I was interested in the circular nature of the desire for development, along with the friction between renewal and the acknowledgement or celebration of the past. What are the implications of a long-standing building being torn down, or a significant landmark being covered, removed or abandoned? This exhibition was presented in 2 parts. Those of you from Swansea and perhaps others will remember the Ocean nightclub on the Kingsway and it being demolished in 2017. Through befriending the demolition workers, I was given permission to video document this historic moment. Through cups of tea, I also learned that Jake Little, the demolition supervisor, was a keen photographer and had been taking pictures of moments of destruction from across the UK over 30 years. I asked him if I could see his work. He brought in a folder with A4 printouts. In this gallery room, I represented his images as slide photos. displayed on the reverse of 2 MDF boards taken from the gallery stud walls. On the front, I displayed a video work of the demolition of Oceana in progress, edited with a sound as the driving force. Concrete music emerged and the crumbling building danced. Wearing a gallery wall. During the 2018 Unite residency at G39, I pursued my interest in the shift of spaces and how building, deconstructing and reconstructing is ingrained in the nature of the gallery. Exhibitions come up and down with a fast turnaround, leaving only small traces of what was there before. I was also reflecting on my own experience as a life model, holding poses in stillness, aching, standing strong, but with the potential to crumble like a building. Quick poses can often be flamboyant architectural statements, challenging gravity with seeming precarious contact points on the ground. I was thinking about the potential of the body as a pillar that could be offered as a support. In this work, Gundia and I took it in turns to offer a pose on which an MDF board from the gallery wall may be placed. It was a puzzle. We carried around and worked out how to best position the board. How far could we challenge our partner in pose and in the leaning? And what surprises may we make? Each time a pose was held, chalk lines were drawn around the elements of both body and board touching the ground, as is done before breaking a life modelling pose. A temporary history was left marked. The performance shifted as we travelled from the front of the gallery into the studio spaces. As we moved into the studio, it became an action that was happening amongst other things. Occasionally, we presented a barrier to those wishing to chat or move past us. Beforehand, it was as though we were in a spotlit theatre space. In essence, we wore the gallery. We became part of the architecture and relied on each other. In Distant Voices in Fluid Communion, Sparrow goes on to say, how can we view one another as not as other bodies, as tools or vessels, or obstacles around which we must navigate, but as flowing streams, intervolved and intervolving, collectively, continuously. Profile stalking. Profile stalking brings us back to the encompassing mountains, a strong and reoccurring motif during lockdowns. The 11-minute video work traces hilltops and desktop screens. The piece resulted from a recycling of gestures moved from outdoors and into my bedroom. It will be shown at Alchemy Arts Festival in the exhibition strand, A Thing That Holds Something Else, later this month. Sparrow ends her text. The briefest confluence changes both streams. The waters mix together, composing and recomposing, a part of one another. Apart from one another, entangling and co-creating, together, however distant, in fluid communion. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr, pawb.